হে নিবাসা ঘুঘুতি রুঞ্জু, হে নিবাসা ঘুঘুতি রুঞ্জু, মেরি পিজু সুড়ালি রুঞ্জু, হে নিবাসা ঘুঘুতি রুঞ্জু।
Welcome back to the second day of the Mussoorie Mountain Festival 2020. I am Meha Bhardwaj.
And I'm Jamie Alter. We're here in Mussoorie on a ridge above the Hannaford Center, and the snow peaks of the Himalaya are clearly visible to the north. Before we begin our third session of the festival, we're fortunate to have with us India's best-loved writer and Mussoorie's most famous celebrity, Mr. Ruskin Bond.
Welcome to the mountains. Welcome to Mussoorie. I've been here now for over 50 years as a permanent resident. So I'm as permanent as any mountain and find it hard to get away. So welcome everyone.
Now let's begin our third session of the festival with this terrific lineup of presentations.
Our first session is a musical performance by Cadenza Collective from Kathmandu, known for blending jazz, Afro-funk and Nepali folk music.
Hello everybody, hope you're doing well and staying safe and healthy. In these unprecedented times of such deep challenges and difficulties, people from around the world are pushing boundaries to make music happen and bring us all together. One such initiative has been the Mussoorie Mountain Festival, and we are thrilled to be a part of this festival and share our music with you all. Thank you so much for having us. Cadenza Collective is a Nepali Afro-funk jazz band originally based in Kathmandu, Nepal, but we are in different parts of the world right now and recording from our homes in the US, Germany and Kathmandu. Thanks to technology, we can still make music together. Today we'll be performing a tune from our new album, the Himalayan songlines called Lai Bari Lai. And if you haven't checked out the album, please do check it out. It's available on all digital and online platforms. Lai Bari Lai is basically a figure of speech in Nepali folkloric music and culture, a phrase that is either sung or spoken in response to stories of everyday life, whether the stories are tragedies or challenging or difficult stories, but also triumphant stories, So basically the response is Lai Bari Lai Lai Lai. Life's got to go on. We've got to move forward with courage and positivity. That's all we can do right now. At least that's the way we perceive it. Hope you all enjoy the tune, and once again, thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure. Please take care. Bye.
Lai lai la, lai bari lai lai lai, lai bari lai bari lai lai la, lai lai la, lai bari lai lai lai, lai bari lai bari lai lai la, lai lai la, lai bari lai lai lai, lai bari lai bari lai lai la, lai lai la. Ifase, gerase. Ifase, gerase. La 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 body la body
Our next speaker is Professor Greg Wray from Duke University, who studies biodiversity.
Hello, I'm Greg Wray, and I'll be speaking about a painting by Frank Wesley and its impact on my career. It's an honor and a pleasure to join you for the Mussoorie Mountain Festival of 2020. Frank Wesley was one of India's foremost Christian artists of the 20th century. He was born in Azamgarh, UP in 1923. My earliest memories of Frank are visiting his home on the outskirts of Jabalpur when I was maybe 7 years old. My mother was intensely interested in Indian Christian art and was very close friends with Frank and with his wife Athalie, who was originally from Australia. The Wesleys lived in a bungalow with a wonderful veranda where we would sit for tea and conversation. And it was during one of these visits that Frank showed us a miniature that he had painted as a gift for Athalie. It showed St. Francis of Assisi surrounded by the birds of Australia, Athalie's homeland. It was done in the Persian miniature style and was maybe this big. I had grown up fascinated by the wildlife of India, and to my eye, the birds in this painting looked very strange. Somewhat presumptuously, I asked whether it would be possible to commission a similar painting of St. Francis attending the birds of India. The grown-ups were amused, but Frank took me seriously. I pledged my entire savings of a few rupees, and we shook hands. But Frank had one condition. I must supply him with a list of names. Frank explained to me that the birds of India were so rich and diverse that he couldn't possibly pick which ones to include in such a painting. I must supply him with a list of 40 names, the same number of birds in Athalie's painting of the Australian birds. I went home and got out my treasured copy of The Book of Indian Birds by Salim Ali and got to work. Soon after my list was delivered. A few years passed. Frank accepted a position as art teacher at Woodstock School. At the time, I was attending elementary school at Woodstock, and every so often a note would show up asking for names of a few more birds. Living on the hillside had exposed me to a whole new range of species, and I now had a copy of Salim Ali's Indian Hillbirds. I had plenty of names to offer. In 1973, word came that the painting was complete. When I saw it, I was absolutely amazed. It was far larger than its predecessor and contained nearly 3 times as many birds. Here you see St. Francis seated under a mango tree, offering nectar to a tiny bee eater. Surrounding him are dozens of other species on the ground: myna, hoopoe, bulbul, as well as some less familiar species like button quail and courser. Perched in the tree above him are about a dozen additional species, including the blue magpie of the Mussoorie hillside. Some of India's most iconic birds are here: peacock, red jungle fowl, sarus crane. These depictions are so accurate, they could appear in a field guide. Birders familiar with the subcontinent's fauna will find them instantly recognizable. I wish I could say that I have personally seen all of these birds. Sadly, one of them, the pink-headed duck, is probably now extinct, while others, like the ibisbill, live in parts of India that I've not yet visited. Filling in that list with additional species is one of my ongoing projects that I find very interesting. My wife, Beth, who also attended Woodstock, accompanies me on trips back to India as often as we're able. Growing up in India and attending school in Mussoorie shaped me profoundly. After graduating from Woodstock, I trained as a biologist. I'm now a professor at Duke University, where I study genetics and I teach. Birds are not the subject of my professional scholarship, but I owe an immense debt to the birds of India, and more broadly to the wildlife and natural history of India, for sparking my love of biology. By an interesting circumstance, my professional life recently led me to Australia, where I've had a chance to witness in real life some of those same birds that I first encountered in Atherley's miniature as a young boy in Jabalpur. Thank you for letting me share these memories.
We're very fortunate to be in partnership with the Himalayan Club and their Oral History Archive, and we'll be airing next a interview between Harish Kapadia and Doug Scott, which was done in 2017, and it's a very, very special presentation for all of you.
Doug Scott is another well-known name in the field of mountaineering for many, many decades. The list of his climb itself will make a very great reading. Climbing Annapurna by south face, a new difficult route, and Everest by the southwest face, where again he spent a night out into the open, quite near to the summit. And he has survived many expeditions also, like on Ogre, when he broke his legs and had to crawl literally on the glaciers towards safety. And many, many other such great climbs has made him what Doug Scott is. Later on, he was involved in charity work in Nepal, and today he runs a charity to help people of Nepal in a very major way. It is his way of giving it back to the mountains and people he has met. With his books and lectures, Doug Scott has certainly made a mark in history, as you will see. Thank you.
The big thing about the Himalaya is, the reason most of us go to the Himalaya is because in the Alps, everything's been done. Every major feature, every elegant line has been taken. Whereas in the Himalaya, it's wide open. Apart from on Everest now, every mountain has still got major features that nobody's attempted. And really, the essence of mountaineering has to be to go where no one's been before, because that means, that gives the opportunity of facing up to a greater degree of uncertainty as to whether you're going to do it, which is always the hallmark of a great adventure. Without that, it was Cicero in the 1st century that said, what's always fascinated man most is the unknown. So what is the point of keep going up, I don't know, the ordinary route of Everest? From that point of view, it's a waste of time. When elsewhere in the Himalaya there's so much that hasn't been done. I mean, that was the thing with the Southwest Face. Once I got a taste for it, I never thought of going to Everest until I was asked when I was about 32 years old. And once I looked at it, I thought, oh, that's interesting this. I wonder what it is like through that rock band and beyond. So each time I was curious to see what the lie of the land was, as well as to see how I would perform. So it's this curiosity which is a big driver, and that's the great attraction of the Himalaya. And then just to be up there and go to, say, like Shivling, and look across and say, oh yes, there's Changabang area, and then you sort of you look at all the detail between these sort of triangles, like the old surveyors of India, triangulating their way through up to the Himalaya and filling in the detail. To an extent, that's what I was able to do in Nepal, especially. Climb this peak and that peak, and oh yeah, there's that one. And then it was just curiosity to fill in like a jigsaw puzzle, putting in pieces. I knew how to handle myself up to 27,000 plus, and I knew all about big wall climbing, so it was kind of second nature. I was quite interested to put the two together, to try and do big wall climbing high up. I thought I was in a good position now to do it, and maybe if I could do this 3,000 foot pillar on up to 23,000 feet, 24, then I might even have time to go and climb something like the west face of Makalu or the west face of K2. I went off to Everest again with Chris Byington's his second trip, but this time we're on to the southwest face. 6 of us have been there twice before, and 3 of us have been there. So 6 of us have been there once before, and 3 of us have been twice before. So it was a strong team, and we had reasonable weather, and we had a good team of Sherpas. Chris did a good job leading it, kept everyone focused and motivated right the way through. And Tut Braithwaite and Nick Escort managed to climb through the rock band, which for the first time we tackled it from the left, from low down on the left side, and they got through more or less in a day. So suddenly we were through the rock band, Camp 6, then we went for it and made it to the top, but quite late in the evening. Didn't get to the top till 6, left at 7, and coming down in the dark, down the Hillary step, it was head torches failed. And by the time we got back to the south summit, 300 feet lower than the summit, we decided to bivouac there and dig into a snowbank and make a cave, which we did with our ice axes, and spent the nights sitting on our rucksacks and survived the night without oxygen nor sleeping bags, and as it turned out, without getting frostbitten. And that part of that expedition really did widen the range of what and how I would climb in the future. Because the assumption being that you could always risk an unplanned bivouac. Men from Nottingham can do these things. So it was a cold night. We couldn't sleep. It was minus 40 or something. So we just sat there, mainly rubbing fingers and toes. But unfortunately, I hadn't got my duvet suit. I'd left it at Camp 6 because it was tight on the knees. I thought we'd go up quick and get back. So I just got kind of silk vest, cashmere jumper, a nylon pile suit, top, and windsuit. So no really good insulation. But Dougal kindly unzipped his suit and let me put my frozen toes under his armpits every now and again. that helped. Yeah, it was a long night, but it did give me the confidence to go off and climb other peaks with less people. The thing about the Southwest Face expedition, what it showed once and for all was that if you do take enough men and materials, fixed rope and Sherpas, oxygen, and it's well led in reasonable weather with an experienced team, you can more or less guarantee doing anything. And since the hallmark of any great adventure is the degree of uncertainty as to the outcome, you can see that next time everyone's going to want to do it differently, with less men and materials, without oxygen, without... So that was a big thing for me. After spending the night there, 9 hours, only just below the summit of Everest.
Without oxygen?
Without oxygen.
Oh.
I knew I would not need oxygen again. And this is what Messner told me. He gave him the confidence to try and do Everest without him using oxygen at all. So, having noted that we'd spent the night there without any ill effects on our brains, well, not that much, I think it'd be quite useful, or advantageous, if early on people going into climbing realised that what makes for a big adventure is the uncertainty as to outcome. So not too much health and safety, because it reduces the uncertainty, makes it too certain. And to go where no one's gone before is a good thing. To try and pioneer, go your own way. And then, if you do, wherever you go, try to leave no trace.
Yeah.
So the next person coming feels that they're there for the first time as well.
Yeah.
And so that would mean that when you go rock climbing, try to leave no evidence that you've been there. And definitely do not drill the rock unnecessarily. If someone's managed to do the climb without drilling, don't go and drill and put bolts in.
Yeah.
If it can be done without, then it should be done without. Respect the way it was first done. Any route you do follow, if you go and do someone else's climb, respect the style of that first ascensionist.
The next session is by award-winning documentary filmmakers Naresh and Rajesh Bedi, popularly known as the Bedi brothers.
Snow leopards are secretive and perfectly camouflaged. They can melt away at the least hint of danger. So thin on the ground and so elusive, they can be extremely hard to find, let alone film. 25 years ago, the pioneering wildlife filmmakers Naresh and Rajesh Bedi presented the first rare glimpses of snow leopards to the world, filmed in Ladakh. Ever since, they have longed to make a more intimate study of the cat, popularly known as the grey ghost of the mountains. Hearing of snow leopard sightings in the Spiti area, the Bedi brothers, both now in their mid-70s, have returned to the mountains to fulfill their long-cherished dream. The Spiti Valley is set in the remote mountains of the Indian state of Himachal Pradesh. The name Spiti means the middle land, the land between Tibet and the Indian Himalayas. It is a cold, high-altitude desert with sparse vegetation. A very hard place to live for humans and wildlife alike. The Bedi brothers have chosen the remote village of Chicham as their base. At 4,120 meters above sea level, it is one of the highest permanently inhabited settlements in the world.
Survival in this extreme environment is a challenge. The charismatic snow leopards rule this hostile terrain. Elusive and solitary in nature, these felines have been little studied or photographed in their high-altitude realm. Indian filmmakers Naresh and Rajesh Bedi braved the inhospitable terrains for 4 long years to capture the life of these endangered cats. Tracking and filming these magnificent cats was a daunting task for the Bedi brothers. The film follows the life of one dominant male, Karma, the king, capturing intimate footage of rarely seen behavior. Lamu, Karma's companion, successfully raises the 2 cubs on her own. It is estimated that there are as few as 4,000 snow leopards left in the wild. Nature takes its course, and ailing Karma succumbs to his old age. Life goes on. Namka, a young male, is quick to claim Karma's territory and his females. Never seen before, this unique film reveals the secret life of snow leopards in their little-known mountain stronghold.
Next we have Majka, a professional climber, author, and filmmaker.
How's it going, everyone? I am really honored to be part of this festival this year. I wish that we could all be there in person, but barring that, we're going to take a quick little journey into what it means when someone obsessed with climbing around the world and exploring those mountains decides that her life and passion should be committed to working with the people who live in those mountains to make them a better place. All right, let's start here. My name is Majka Burhardt. I'm a professional climber. I'm the founder and executive director of Legado, but I'm here right now to ask you to take a break for a moment and close your eyes. Picture a mountain. Really get one in there. Take a break. What does it look like? How many peaks does it have? Is it snowy? Is it icy? Are there rock faces? Open your eyes. I showed you this skyline before. Maybe you saw Patagonia. Maybe you saw the Tetons in the US. My question for you, though, is did you see people? Because that's who I see. I'm the founder and executive director of Legado. We work to protect the most hyper biodiverse in the mountains from becoming lifeless peaks. And we do it by working hand in hand with people like the Napalakis, this family. Here's the thing. Most people think of mountains like those craggy, rock, icy skylines I just showed you. I should know, I'm a professional climber. And for the majority of my life, my livelihood and my life have been about going to those types of mountains. And along the way, I've had the privilege of moving through some of the most incredible, lush, verdant rainforest in the world. And I've seen the people who live alongside and inside these rainforests, cutting down trees to make room to grow crops to feed their families. The same exact thing that I would do if I lived there and I didn't have other opportunities to take care of my family and other income for myself and my community. Nowhere is this more prevalent than in the mountains in Africa's Great Rift Valley. And not only is it compromising the people's livelihoods who live in these mountains, but it's compromising site after site of the world's biodiversity hotspots. I began working to change all this on Mozambique's Mount Namuli. In Mozambique, on Namuli, we put together a team of professional climbers, of scientists from South Africa, Mozambique, and the US, and went up the side of Mount Namuli to try to find new species to science, but also to try to launch a new way to do conservation. Because what we had in front of us was a huge opportunity. While the climbing was an adventure and involved lassoing giant grass tufas that were protection more in mind than in reality, where we got to put up a first ascent, a 1,200-foot first ascent on the second highest peak in Mozambique, what we were really there for was to create a conversation and a movement about how to protect these mountains. Because Mount Namuli is exceptional, but Mount Namuli is also the story of many, many mountains that have the complexity of the biodiversity that they have on them, as well as the richness of the local populations who call these mountains home. I like to say that these mountains, which we call Sky Islands, are the only place where this sort of math works out. Because they might be 3% of the land mass in a country like Mozambique, but they hold 30% of the biodiversity. And not only is their biodiversity disproportionate to their size, but because these are Sky Islands, what that means is that each mountain has biodiversity on it that exists and species on it that exists there and nowhere else in the world, because these mountains are floating in seas of clouds instead of seas of water. So for me, I began with a background as a professional climber and a sort of environmental and conservation entrepreneur to say, all right, how do we crack this? How do we make what we're doing on Mount Namuli scalable so that we can work and apply this to other mountains and with other mountain communities around the world so that together we can protect this biodiversity and do it in concert and in harmony with the people who call these mountains home and raise their families there. This is how you do it, by working with the people who live on the flanks of this mountain. What we do is we create thriving futures with thriving people. Thriving futures by putting thriving people and thriving places together. We do that with Elias in the top right corner. We do that with the Queen of Namuli in the bottom center. We work with people to identify what it is that they want to create in their legacy and how that channels up to the legacy of their community. And then in turn, how that lands a thriving future for themselves that is in concert with the biodiversity, with the land, the river, the forests, the critters, the ecology, you name it, and puts people in the position of being the rightful deciders of how to live into the future, which is the same thing that I would imagine you or I would want to have in our lives and in our homes. So what do I mean by a thriving future? Well, as I said, this came from the mountains. So we take all of these pieces, environmental health, education, human health, land and resource rights, income and economics, and culture, and we tie them up into this Venn diagram where at the center is that thriving future. And it's no different than what any of us want anywhere in the world, whether it's here in Jackson, New Hampshire, where I'm talking to you from, or whether it's in the Mukunya community on the base of Namuli. You need all of these things you need to be moving towards all of these things to feel balanced, to feel like you have an opportunity. And what's really cool is the way Legado does this is that we've sort of stepped away from the traditional mode of conservation, of only interacting around biodiversity and environmental health. And what we do is we look at how to create this in concert with everything else. And Legado sits in that space in the middle. We're a convener for Thriving Future Solutions. It's been a really wild ride to go from putting up a first ascent on Mount Namuli in 2014 to now, 6 years later, to be taking this model and bringing it to Kenya, to the Philippines, and possibly Botswana, all in 2021. And it's made possible, sometimes I think about it, by that tenacity of being a climber. Because when we started working on Namuli, no one thought what we were doing was possible. Mountains are incredibly hard to get to. Working on them is not dependent, things wash out. And mountain people are stubborn, right? I'm talking to a bunch of mountain people. We are stubborn people. We don't like being told what to do. But to me, instead of all those challenges turning me away, they inspired me to create a solution that it could actually be scaled. To say it's not enough just to go climb in these mountains. And it's not enough just to go climb and do science and mic drop at the end and say, one day someone should figure out how to protect this incredible biodiversity. And as an asterisk, maybe do it with the local people. And I realized that if no one else was doing that, then that wasn't an excuse to also not do it. To me, it was it was sort of a call to action to sit down, roll up my sleeves, create a really innovative team to bring all of the principles of running expeditions around the world to being scrappy, to being innovative, to never saying no, to giving it 200%, and to create Legado. Legado means legacy in Spanish and Portuguese, and it's creating a legacy-based thriving future that drives us as an organization and drives me every day. Thanks so much. It's been fun to talk to you all. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Next, we have Lalitha Krishnan, producer and host of the podcast Heart of Conservation.
This is how I start my day, gazing at the deodar and listening to birdsong. Hi, I'm Lalitha Krishnan, and I live in Landor, a small hilltop in the Indian Himalaya. Landor is a paradise for bird watchers. Most of the birds in this video have been photographed from my balcony with a handheld camera. I hope you enjoy the incredible biodiversity Landor has to offer.
Hi, my name is Surbhi, and I, on behalf of the Mussoorie Heritage Centre, welcome you all to the Mussoorie Writers Festival. I run this Mussoorie Heritage Centre, which is a space where we archive, document, and digitalize and research on the heritage, history, and other aspects of Mussoorie and the adjoining region. I also run a series called the Landor Lecture Series since last 8 years, where we invite different people and give a cultural and social platform for talks and exchange of ideas.
Next, we have poet, translator, and essayist Arvind Krishna Mehrotra.
Hello, I'm Arvind Krishna Mehrotra, and I'll be reading some poems for the Mussoorie Mountain Festival My brief is to read poems on the Himalayas, but I've never been to the Himalayas. But since I live in Dehradun, I often in author notes say that I live in the foothills of the Himalayas. So I suppose I have something to do with the Himalayas after all. The poems mention the range, the Himalayas, sometimes. They invariably mention a mountain. But these are the mountains which I really see from my window, and they are the mountains of Mussoorie, or the hill station of Mussoorie. So those are the mountains I see. The first poem is Ramapithecus and I, and Ramapithecus was a ape ancestor of ours, and it's believed that he walked the Shivalik range, however millions of years ago. So I have a wall map of Dehradun, and I was looking at the wall map and I imagined Ramapithecus with me, who lived in this area before me, one of my ancestors. So this is called Ramapithecus and I. The young swamp he came to 6 million years ago, his unfazed mother behind him, his father recently dead. Is the wall map's mixed forest a dotted par line along its edge, and the windows low clouded hills, dolomite and fossil rich, making his home where his implements took him. He waited for the rains to break. Cutting my finger, it's his blood I taste. The second poem, these are poems written in my garden, where I've spent a lot of my time, especially after the lockdown. And this is called Lockdown Garden. So I'll read 3 poems from Lockdown Garden. The first, they're not titled, so I'll just pause between the poems, or say this is the second poem or something like that. This is the first. The kill in its beak, the Himalayan bulbul thrashed its head from side to side. Only the butterfly's blue wings were found amidst the dead leaves and pine needles. The second poem. When a branch of the Dillenia fell, it was as if a corrugated sheet had been ripped off the tree. Behind it, above the garden shed, rose a blue hill in the distance. And the third of these Lockdown Garden poems. Go tell my neighbor, the chartered accountant, who has an office in Himalaya apartments, that the ice caps are melting. Seeing the green stem projecting over the low brick wall had entered his airspace. He broke it in two and left it dangling on the branch to teach me a lesson. The last poem is I go for a walk in the morning on Rajpur Road, and this is one of the things I saw there. Again, the poem has no title. In the tree hollow was enough room for a small family and its trash bag. The family had driven off, leaving behind the bag oozing trash juice. This is a highway. It leads to the mountains. Once surrounded by forest, the tree had survived termites. Tall, girthy, its branches were too high for me to identify the species from the leaf. It had no flowers, and the sun was in my eyes. Thank you.
Pitt in the remote Himalayas. Join us on an educational expedition of discovery. Travel virtually to the Himalaya with a team of experienced teachers working remotely in the remote mountains to learn about one of the most spectacular environments on Earth. Join us as we use Google Earth 3D mapping to place ourselves on mountaintops and gain a perspective of the mountains and on the home of the gods. We offer 3 courses: Himalayan Geography, Religion and Ecology, and Himalayan Biodiversity. 3 in-person remote courses are supported by multimedia virtually guided expeditions into the mountains to explore villages, temples, and national parks. Hanaful staff draw on the resources and extensive networks built by the center to develop in-depth course content that is unique to the experience of each instructor and curated specifically for Pitt study abroad courses. The instructors include Joseph Alter, teaching Religion and Ecology, Akshay Shah, teaching Himalayan Geography, and Suniti Dutt, teaching Himalayan Biodiversity. Now you may ask yourself, how can I study abroad without traveling? Let us show you how. Learn about conservation at Jubberkate Nature Reserve through virtual guided tours and study projects. Learn about Himalayan religious pilgrimage on virtual tours of Gutuk, source of the sacred Ganga. Take a guided tour with Himalayan farmers and learn what it takes to plow a field and speak with oxen. Join us for a semester that is virtually out of this world. Guided virtual tours of life in Himalayan villages and religious festivals. Virtual adventures that will inspire you to write. Get up close with leopards, bears, and musk deer to experience biodiversity, and much, much more. Sign up and enroll now. Woodstock alumni are more than welcome.
Up next, we have author, historian, and food critic Pushpesh Pant.
I have not been able to go up to my beloved hills for almost a year now, thanks to the corona lockdown. But whenever I go to bed, before I go to sleep, my thoughts go back to Mukteshwar, a small village-like town where my childhood was spent. I grew up in Mukteshwar, and you could see from the house 120 kilometers plus of the Himalayan view, panoramic view in front of your house. There were 2 devdar trees, and in monsoons, when the sunset was rain-washed, you could have myriad hues of scarlet and yellow in the sky. But what comes back to me most hauntingly, what remains fresh in memory, is the smells and tastes of the food which we had in Mukteshwar. Food was simple. In winter was a great leveler. Everybody ate the same food. We were a little more affluent than people who surrounded us, the villagers who formed the periphery of the Mukteshwar, where this laboratory was there, where my father used to work. But in winters, there was no motor road then. We had the advantage of electricity, but everybody ate whatever had been stored like a squirrel for the winters. Small pits were dug, and vegetables were put to remain there till they came to our rescue in the winters. There were potatoes, there were yams, there were radishes. And I recall there was a Pahadi Kumaoni phrase which said, "Ek hi khad ke pinanu hai." Khad was the small underground pit, and if colocasia came out of the same pit, it was supposed to indicate that they shared the same qualities, good or the bad, mostly bad. But then what happened was, you tried to stretch this food as much as you could. You would have aloo ke gutke, you would have aloo and mooli ki thechwani, and the things which come back are things which were simple, which everybody shared. It was a watery soup of potatoes, maybe it was a gutka, which was stir-fried in a cast iron kadai. And then one realized that how these foods, which were foods of necessity during winters, were also the foods of celebration in the hills. I cannot remember any marriage, any puja, where aloo ka gutka was not made. Now this aloo ka gutka, what you eat today, is a very poor imitation of, everybody who remembers his childhood thinks that that was the golden age and things have deteriorated ever since. But I think aloo ka gutka is one dish which makes you think how much things have changed. Now people described good-looking young maidens as, "Oh, aloo gutu jaisi dikhne hai." But she looks like a aloo ka gutka, which means beautifully chiseled cubes of potatoes, which people, delicious. So then one comes across the years, the word to describe beauty is lavanya in Sanskrit, which derives from the word lavana, which is from salt. So this is what the aloo ka gutka was. It was the simplest possible dish, cooked in a cast iron kadai in mustard oil, which had been made locally, cold pressed locally. And all flavors you had was just whole red chilies, you had a little turmeric, you had salt, and you had the aromatizing agent, which was jambu, the Himalayan chives, and thereby hangs a long tail. Till mid-50s, till our relationship with China had not soured, there were these people who were called bhotias. Actually, they were shokas who brought this jambu. They were Trans-Himalayan traders, and they brought this jambu grown in the Himalayan plateau, and it was aromatic, it was supposed to be therapeutic, and it was supposed to have notes of things like garlic. So even Orthodox Brahmins or Thakurs or Vaishyas in the hills who eschewed onions and garlic would take pleasure in this. So you had aloo ka gutka, and then you had the holy celebrations, the singing in the villages, in the towns there was a batak sitting, holy sitting, and people had this as a snack. So you had aloo ka gutka as compulsion. During the winters, you had it as a celebrity meal in a puja in a temple. If there was a puja celebration, people sacrificed a goat and had a bhat, which was a communal meal, a thin watery soup which was shared alike. That's why it was called bhat. But there again, in the aloo ka gutka, the jambu came there. So I think this jambu takes me back to a part of my life, and in my middle of the 8th decade of my life, where there was an interaction between far to reach, hard to reach places in the hinterland on the border where Tibet and Nepal and India meet, and the township of Almora, and beyond to Mukteshwar and Nainital. And this jambu was valued. A bit of jambu comes from Munshari even today, but is not quite the same thing. And then you had Holi, where everybody else in the plains had gujia. So did we have in Almora. But the Holi ki batak, the essential meal, was aloo ka gutka and suji ka halwa. So whether it's a marriage or puja, a holi or compulsion during winters, there was this common meal, potato was there. And I think the cast iron kadhai had something special about it. It related you to the lohar, the metallurgist who provided this, and a relationship of interdependence, which a person who worked in metal with a person who preached and performed ritual was the same. So you have the marriage feasts, you have the cholyars dancing, the sword dances, ultimately ending up with a tiffin, a hot steaming glass of tea and aloo ka gutka. So my thoughts go back to aloo ka gutka, they go back to jambu, they go back to how a simple thing could be a celebratory dish and also a staple.
We hope you enjoyed the third session of the Mussoorie Mountain Festival 2020. Before we move on to our next session, let's have a virtual tea break courtesy of Hapurwala's Sweet Shop in Landau Bazaar.
Ram Ram.
Welcome to the Mountain Festival, which is happening at Woodstock. This year we are not with you, but yes, we are with you, virtually. And I am Pankaj Agarwal from the banner Hapurwalo ki Dukaan. I am following the legacy. This is the same shop which is in your service for last 75 years. And I am proud to say that this is the same trade and I am the 5th generation serving the same business. ये एक इकोनॉमिकल रेंज निकालिए सुमन, मावा और काजू, क्योंकि थोड़ा सा आप सुमन नोटियाल हैं स्टीविया, बताओ सुमन अपने बारे में। Take this one.
हे निबाशा घुगुती रूंजो, हे निबाशा घुगुती रूंजो, मेरी एजू सुड़ाली निबाशा घुगुती